The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
Now, this is the amazing Kreskin. If you could read my thoughts, you'd know you're listening to Mr. Media Radio.
Thanks, Kreskin. Today on Mr. Media, I'll talk to comedian Marc Maron, who's expanding his reputation as host of the comedy interview podcast, What the Fuck with Marc Maron. What the fuck made me say that? This is the third in my series of shows featuring content heard on Stitcher, the iPhone, Android, BlackBerry, Palm Pre internet radio app that is my favorite smartphone app ever. Stick around, or we'll lock the gate.
Hey, did you know that you can listen to the latest Mr. Media show right on your phone with the Stitcher app? Stitcher's smart radio for your smartphone. Mr. Media is on demand and on the go with Stitcher. Download Stitcher for your phone today. Get the free app at www.stitcher.com. That's STITCHER.com.
So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is a Mr. Media interview. You know, MrMedia.com, MRMedia.com. Stop by and check it out. There are more than 700 archived celebrity interviews for your listening pleasure. The show is brought to you today by thepartyauthority.us. Planning a wedding, mitzvah, or corporate event in the New York, New Jersey area? For any and all occasions, call the Party Authority nationwide at 1-800-DIAL-DJs. That's 1-800-342-5357, where one call does it all. Mr. Media is recorded live before a studio audience of guys who knew Tommy Blaze and Ron Bennington back in the days when they played the Coconuts Comedy Clubs here in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. Well, if you love stand-up comedy and enjoy listening to intelligent conversation with America's funniest men and women on TV and in film, meet Marc Maron. Maron is one of those guys, like Richard Belzer, Louie C.K., and the late Robert Schimmel, that comedians themselves turn to get a serious dose of the funny. He's outrageous, unrestrained, and full of self-loathing. Everything you want when dropping serious change on a night out. He's also developed a new world to conquer, podcasting. Maron is the host and producer of WTF with Marc Maron. All right, actually, it's called What the Fuck with Marc Maron, emphasis on fuck, but you can't write or say that in some places. Here, no problem. The show is a place for Maron to sit down with some of his closest friends and occasional antagonists or one-time enemies and talk funny. Many of the conversations take place literally in his garage, although he's been taking the show on the road much more often lately, talking to Will Ferrell's producing partner Adam McKay in the last week or two in his office, or visiting with Ray Romano on the set of his new show, Men of a Certain Age. And he's taken the show on the road in even more literal terms, sharing the stage with an array of regional comics and combining stand-up with conversation, as he did this past week in Austin. Now, here's a taste of a more introspective Marc Maron during his Austin show.
You know, when you commit your life to art or whatever the fuck it is, when you're willing to say, like, I forego anything that people consider normal or human or safe in order to do this ridiculous fucking dream that I have, that right there, once you're at that crossroads and you make that decision, you're already on a different path. And then somewhere in the middle of that path, you realize, holy shit, this isn't working out. And then... and then you start to scramble for plan Bs, right? And then there's sort of like, I could fucking teach. And then you're like, teach what? You know, there's always that one. Like, or I could go back to school, right? I couldn't even fucking handle it the first time. So then all of a sudden, you're midway through and you're like, I got no choices. There's no plan B. And then you just sort of like kind of crumble into a slow motion train wreck that becomes the rest of your life.
I'm so happy since I discovered his show on Stitcher. People who listen know that I tend to take the dogs for long walks, and I'll listen to Stitcher while I'm walking the dogs. And because of Maron, I take longer walks so I can get in more of the show. It usually takes me about 2 walks to get in the full show because he usually does about an hour. Sometimes he does 2-parters. Anyway, I love the show. It's great company. You can subscribe to What the Fuck with Marc Maron on your iPhone or other smartphone via the Stitcher app, or you can visit his site, WTFpod.com. And Marc Maron, welcome to Mr. Media.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here, Bob. That was a hell of an intro. You sound like you're running a tight shop down there in St. Pete.
Well, you got all the old people. Somebody's got to remain in control of their senses.
Yeah, this seems all very professional to me. I think I got to sit up in my chair. I just, I'm out here on the road. I'm doing shows in Cincinnati tonight and tomorrow and Sunday, and I just, cooked. I'm at a residence hotel, and this is where my life is. It's like, I am really excited if I'm staying at a hotel with an oven and a kitchen in it. I would, and let me tell you something. If I can make my own waffle in the morning, that is luxury for me. And right now, I'm just cooked up a bowl of progressive self-hatred soup. It's awesome, and I'm here in my residence hotel enjoying that as I talk to you.
Well, I'm delighted that you're comfortable. I actually prefer the residence inn myself. My wife would rather have the full luxury of a hotel, but I'd rather make my waffles and move on.
Yeah, that's the thing about wives. It's hard to sell them on the whole waffle experience.
Yeah, exactly. And this coming from a man who's had a wife.
Yeah, that too. And you got to sit there and really show when they watch you getting very excited about the 3-minute waffle maker at the free breakfast at a Marriott. That's a very humbling moment where you really have to fight the realization that this is ridiculous and I'm a child, which they know both of those things already, and they'd really rather just go elsewhere.
Yeah, you've been married, all right. Mark, I got to ask you. I played that little bit from Austin where you talked about, I could be a teacher, something like that. Now, you're doing a WTF show there as opposed to doing a straight, 45-minute stand-up routine. But I am wondering, is something like that? Is that something that you've worked on, that you've planned, or was that impromptu? It sounded impromptu to me.
Well, my comedy has always been sort of a few trajectories of conversation. I don't look at my jokes as really jokes. I always got into comedy because I wanted to, have a point of view. I wanted to, be able to speak my mind and figure out what my particular philosophy on life was. So I just look at my stand-up as it evolves as an ongoing conversation I have with my audiences. And certainly the whole Plan B thought process and the whole realization that it's getting a little late to go back or hang on to those things is something I've had in my head for a while, and I've discussed at different points in time in one way or another. I have done it on stage in the form of one of the darker moments I can experience as an adult is when I'm sitting out in my garage, I'm alone, things are not working out with my career or my life. And the darkest realization I have had is when I'm sitting there, I actually think in an honest way that, maybe it's time to get the band together. Now, as an adult, I've never been in a band, Bob. I play a little guitar, but the realization that my brain goes to that, I want to go from the second lowest rung on show business ladder to the lowest one and perhaps put a band together at 47 years old is ridiculous. So it all sort of evolves out of that moment that, I'm relatively infantile in my delusions of what's next for me. But thank God I'm pretty busy and I'm doing something I love right now, and I don't have as many of those thoughts as I used to.
Well, my sense from listening to the show, and I haven't had the pleasure of seeing you live yet, although interestingly, after listening to your 2-part show with Louie C.K. a few weeks back, the minute tickets for his show in Tampa went on sale at the end of this month, I bought 2 tickets and I'm going to take my wife. So we'll do the same when next time you come through. But it seemed to me, listening to you, Bob,
it'll be easier to get tickets for me. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But listening to your show a couple times a week, and especially lately when you're doing the Austin show, it seemed to me that it is a lot of it's kind of stream of consciousness. A lot of it does not seem like stuff that you've worked through 100 times. There may be bits that recur, but I think what makes you such a good interviewer on the show is that you're able to just make conversation with people and be funny.
Well, I think that's really what the thrust of the show is about, and it's something I came around to sort of as the show evolved. And it's also the way I do comedy, which is not the most consistent way to do it. I'm willing to sacrifice consistency for creating, something real in the moment. And I like doing that on stage as well, which makes it a little more menacing as a performer, because there are moments where the audience is like, is he still in charge? And I like that. I think it's important for an audience to experience that. So with the conversations, I sort of, as a kid, I was always a guy that, I liked to hang around with, people who were, hanging out in front of my grandpa's appliance store. I really liked listening to people. And somewhere along the line, I got jaded and cynical, and I'd been doing comedy too long, and I got defensive, and I sort of lost that part of my life, which I got a lot of joy out of. So as I started interviewing people and really realizing that it doesn't matter what we're talking about, as long as we're engaged in the conversation, that it's very rewarding for me, and I think it's why the podcast is popular with listeners. And I think that comedians, because I'm in that community and have been almost all of my adult life, are people with a lot of free time on their hands and certainly have plenty of time to think about a lot of things, including, their life and how they deal with problems, but also looking out at the world. I see them as philosophers to a certain degree once you get under the veneer of their act, and I think that the show has sort of proved that over time, and I find it to be very exciting.
It's been interesting to me, obviously, as I knew we were going to talk today, pay a little extra attention to the way you do things on the show, and the thing that I'm thinking about a lot is that we have comedians tend to be our late night talk show hosts, whether it's Leno or Conan or Letterman or Stewart. And some of them are very, very good. You can tell the guys who actually think about stuff. They make conversation. They can respond on a dime. And I also know I've had a lot of guys like that on this show. And then I've also had the guys and the women who, if they don't have their list of questions ahead of time, if they don't have the specific topics, if they haven't laid it all out, they can't function. You're not one of those people.
Well, there's a difference between guys who, look, when you do a radio thing, excuse me, I got a little of this self-hatred soup caught in my throat. If you're doing a radio thing, specifically if you want to, it's just that we have our acts, and a lot of people live in their acts, and a lot of people want to figure out, what bits that they have will fit into the conversation so they can, hit their last, because that's the way they engage with the world. And I've certainly talked to a couple of guys like that on my podcast, but I still find that given a certain amount of time, eventually they will talk in a normal tone about things that they may not talk about. You have to realize, in my mind, being a comic or being a funny person, comes first and foremost from being defensive, preemptively guarded. You develop a way to sort of take over a conversation, take over a room with a certain skill set that doesn't necessarily involve you putting much of yourself into it emotionally. It's a defense mechanism. But in that, as you sort of develop it, you can be sort of enlightening, and you can take on things and make people see things differently. But I think a lot of guys, would rather just, look, this is what I do. I'm funny. I want to figure out how I can be funny, so give me the questions. And that's just part of the game. Some dudes are like that. And when I talk to them, I let them be funny, and I let them entertain me. And if that's where it's going to go, that's where it's going to go.
One of the things for people who have not yet heard, and I hopefully at this point they're already looking for What the Fuck with Marc Maron on Stitcher or iTunes or on your website at this point in the conversation, if they haven't already heard it. One of the things I really like is, and you have an advantage there, you sit down with people that you already know. For example, you sat down with Sarah Silverman. You knew her sister. You're able to talk intelligently about her sister being a rabbi and how she's moved to Israel, and you have a relationship there. You talked about, this was fascinating, with Louie C.K. You talked about his one of his earliest apartments, and I don't know if it was in the Village, and what a mess it was, and how he used to write on the walls, and has it been hard for you doing the show and interviewing your friends, figuring out if and where there is a line, even with your friends?
Well, it's interesting, and I'm sure by interviewing people that you sort of, you're going to. I did an interview with Ira Glass recently, and he, more than anybody else, his job is to be an interviewer, and he's very respected and he's very good at it. He's not a comic. He does This American Life, and I was excited and intimidated to talk to somebody who is, a genuine pro in the format I seem to be working in. And, he brought up something, is that the interview is going to be determined by what you bring to it. And I happen to be a fairly boundaryless, intense, aggressive guy that's very willing to talk about themselves. And a lot of times people will try and sort of step up to do that if they're capable. But a lot of people aren't. And I think as an interviewer that you can sense that, and you can sense where you have to be delicate and where, you have to give the person the space and time to sort of, go to a different place. But if they're not going to do it, they're not going to do it. And you can only be so confrontational. I mean, as you know, with my Dane Cook interview, I was really, too confrontational right out of the gate for no reason, just because I quit nicotine that day, and also I didn't know what the hell to talk to him about. And also, he comes with a lot of baggage in terms of the comedy community's judgment of him. But I will admit to being somewhat of an asshole. And out of that came something fairly interesting. It might have been a different interview had I not been so aggressive, but there was a couple of moments I think that really made it worthwhile. And the interesting thing about that interview is that because I was an asshole, a lot of people who didn't like Dane Cook liked him more as a person after my interview.
Mm-hmm.
You never know.
Well, it's very interesting to get a comedian in this situation. I got a little story of my own. Robert Schimmel, the late Robert Schimmel, was on with me when his book came out, Cancer on $5 a Day, and I was nervous about having him on because I know he's very highly regarded. He can be very profane and he's very smart. And he came on, and it was supposed to be a 30-minute show, and he didn't stop talking. So we got to, I think, an hour, and I finally had to cut him off. And I said, hey, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Please come back anytime. He said, okay, when? And I'm like, what? What? What do you mean when? He said, no, when do you want me to have me back? I said, I don't know, a couple of weeks. He said, okay, work it out with publicists and I'll be back. And I swear to you, 4 weeks later, he was back on. I think we spent another 90 minutes. And, the great thing with the comedians is the ones who can talk and are intelligent, you just shut up. And, I mean, he did all the work. It's like, I don't know where I'm going.
And also, you're talking about a very, Robert, may he rest in peace, was a very sweet man and a very forthcoming guy who shared his struggles in a very honest way, in order to help himself, but also bring a lot of hope and humor to a lot of people who were suffering some of the same things that he did. But he was a big-hearted dude, and we're all going to miss him.
Now, the podcast seems to be kind of a go-to mechanism now for a lot of stand-ups. I know I listen to Doug Benson's Doug Loves Movies show, and I don't know the guy's name, unfortunately, the guy who hosts the Nerdist. And I'm also thinking that I'm wondering if this is the case, that Ricky Gervais may have opened this door for a lot of guys when he started doing his podcast a couple of years back, and not only was it popular, but he figured out a way to make money from it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't listen to a lot of other people's shows. I don't listen to much of anything. I'm very busy with my own head and my own thing. But, I generally listen to NPR when I'm at home or music. But in terms of what opened the door, I really don't know what the history of podcasting is or who did what. I came into it in a fairly desperate mode. I had just been fired for the third time from a radio/internet job. I was the morning guy on Air America in its original incarnation. I was fired, and then I did an evening show for them, and I was fired. And then in the middle of a divorce, out of complete desperation, I took another job with them. And after a year at that, I was fired. And I've been working with the same producer on all those shows, and we were sitting there, and we'd just been fired, and they didn't take our security cards away, and they weren't going to take our office away for another 2 weeks. So we were like, well, let's do this podcast thing. Let's break into the studios at night, and pull people up there and start doing this and see what happens. I knew about the form. I knew that there was a possibility of it, and I'd been doing radio a long time, and I was looking for the opportunity to get out of political talk radio and get into something more creative and more interesting and more honest to my comedic voice. And we started doing the first 6 or 10, in this hijack studio late at night. And we were bringing guests up, by the freight elevator. We'd tell the guests we had like Gaffigan and Stanhope and Garofalo and Caroline Ray and Nick Griffin were all on some of those early ones, Todd Berry. And we were like, just text us when you're in the neighborhood and we'll come find you. And we did those first 10 episodes, and we were just sort of stunned at the reaction the show got and the number of people that were into it. So I moved back to Los Angeles, and I set the studio up in my garage. So in terms of, what the who set the standard or who did what and where, it seems that, even now, even up till a few months ago, that was still pretty much the Wild West out there. And not a lot of people jumped on board until recently. Now it seems like everybody's jumping on board. I know there are a couple of long-standing podcasts, Jimmy Pardo, Never Not Funny, and Jimmy's great. And a couple of guys have figured out ways to make money at it. But it's a little challenging when you don't have a big name to sell your podcast because it becomes very difficult to figure out how to grow that and bring new listeners in. But so I don't know who did what or why. I just know that it is the Wild West. It's an exciting new medium. You have complete freedom. You're your own boss. And if you can get people to find you, they're going to find you in a very pure and unadulterated form.
I couldn't agree more. And folks, it's not that easy to make a profit doing a podcast yet. But let me tell you that Mark's he has at least one sponsor, one advertiser. It's Adam and Eve, and I want to play for you. The other thing he has right now in his life is a steady girlfriend, and I want to play for you. I want to play for you this little clip from the Austin show where he and his girlfriend did a little commercial for Adam and Eve. Give a listen to this.
So we're a couple now, right?
Yeah.
So you're thinking what I need, a cock ring or
strap-on?
Wait. You know what? Let's not talk about that here. It makes me a little uncomfortable. So let's. But
they've got a lot on Adam and Eve.
All right, let's just leave. Let's talk about that later. Come on, really, a strap-on?
Why not? 50% off.
I got a couple reasons.
You got to get creative with those ads. You know what I mean?
I think that was great. I love that. I mean, plus, we've heard you talking about the girlfriend, and there she is talking about cock rings and strap-ons. It's like, wow, okay.
Yeah, it's a little surprising to me too, but it's weird with that sponsor because I get some flack for it from some of the more highbrow listeners, and I refuse to take any criticism. I mean, sex should be fun. It should be interesting. You should do whatever you need to do to keep it interesting within the realms of legality. And for a while there, I was primarily focusing on my female listeners to replace or get a new vibrator or dildo because I've been around long enough to know that you all have one. And I thought that I was just trying to figure out a new angle to sell dildos basically, and certainly it was a little surprising that Jessica brought up the strap-on because she is a fairly petite girl, and I couldn't really imagine her with a large penis.
Well, and it's interesting for people who don't know this. I mean, the history of radio is such that in the 30s and 40s, the ads, the commercials were basically part of the programming. I mean, what's the guy's name? The guy for Johnson Glow Coat would be part of the Fibber McGee and Molly show, and he would just walk onto the set and make selling Johnson's Glow Coat part of the thing, and he'd have a conversation. Now, I can't imagine Molly McGee talking to Fibber about strap-ons, but I mean, things have changed a little bit.
Well, let's do imagine it because that's some hilarious shit there. But I think that's exactly what we've come back around to is that that is the way that it works, and it's pretty exciting. Having done regular radio and having to build entire segments. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but on terrestrial radio, I mean, an hour of programming is usually about 36 minutes. So that means you're dealing with about 24 minutes of advertising. And you're building your segments, that is seeming like an hour to the listener, really pushing up to a break where you can sell things that you have no control over. And you may not even know what you're selling. And a lot of times you're selling, ridiculous things or maybe even things you don't agree with. The interesting thing about generating some revenue stream for a podcast is that gets popular enough to be attractive to advertisers is that you can really pick and choose, and you're doing old-style pitch, exactly like the beginning of radio, the beginning of television. You're integrating it into a monologue. Like I have a coffee sponsor out of Wisconsin that was kind enough to sponsor me during an internet radio show I did. They don't send me a lot of money, but they send me a lot of coffee, and I built a pitch around their product that I really like doing, and I do like their coffee, and I think I've really turned their business around in a lot of ways. I've certainly added a lot of new customers to their business, because I knew in my mind, look, as a former drug guy, coffee is a drug, and if people dig this stuff, they're going to have some real loyalty there. So so that really worked out for me. I hope I'm selling dildos as well as I sold coffee. That's all I'm saying.
Mark, in so many ways, I hope you are too. Let me ask you this: are you seeing an impact of the podcast on the live shows?
Well, look, what's happening with me, to be honest, Bob, is that what I do on my show is very personal. It's funny in a certain way, but there's a big difference between being in front of an audience and having that as the context, which is your job as a comedian is to get laughs. You'd probably like a couple per minute if possible. Maybe you can stretch it out a bit. There's no real. You can determine whatever you want, but you are held to the expectation of the audience sitting in front of you. And as you know, when you do a podcast or you're on radio, your relationship is very intimate. It's one-on-one. You're really talking to one person who is either driving to work, walking their dog, on the treadmill, sitting in their cubicle. So, what I can share and where I can go emotionally and, with my life on the podcast is much more in depth and much more, a little more elaborate. So that relationship, especially because of the type of radio I'm doing or the podcast, is very personal, and I'm sharing things about myself that are fairly raw, and people, know is pretty honest. So the type of feedback I'm getting and the type of people that are gravitating to the show, are people who are like-minded. And it's very interesting that, and a lot of people are very grateful. I'm getting emails that I never thought I would get. Even more so than when I did political radio. I'm getting emails like, you're really helping me through a hard time. You saved my life. I quit drinking because of what you said. I was going to kill myself. I'm not anymore. It's sort of a lot to handle, and I don't always know what to say back to them other than thanks. I'm glad you didn't kill yourself. But, that's a nice thing. That's a nice email to get. So what I'm finding is that, people come out to the shows, and there are definitely more coming out to the shows, but they know me really well. They know me, better than my mother may know me, though she listens and she keeps up with my life that way too, because I don't call her that much. But they come up after the show and they're like, yeah, that was a great show, and they're like, but how's the cat? Is the cat okay? Is it still throwing up? Like, they know these details about my life, and it's sort of I'm very grateful for the relationship, but it's a little awkward because I don't know them, but I do know in my heart that they know me pretty well, and it's sort of interesting to manage that dynamic and to understand it and to give people the time to connect with me in person. So that's added a whole different element to the live shows.
Now, I think what you meant to say is people ask about your 5 cats, right? Not just one cat.
Well, if you're going to judge, Bob, as you know, I'm not a cat guy. I'm a my cat guy. I don't care about your cats, but right. I'll pretend to if I come over. But I have 3 of my own, and then a couple seem to be sort of freeloading outside, and they're not. Yeah, and I get very resentful of the strays because I think they're entitled. They have high expectations. They're mooches, and they don't let me touch them. And they literally sit outside, and I look out the window, and they literally have, where the fuck is our food faces? And, there have been times where I'll walk out and I'll go, yeah, I think I'm going to make you wait today because you guys you're assholes. And I don't appreciate you coming here and eating my food, and I really expect you to be nice and meet me halfway in terms of the love-giving and getting situation. Needless to say, this doesn't work, and I end up feeding them anyways.
Well, listen, Mark, folks, we're going to run out of time, but I want to tell you, you can catch the latest episode of What the Fuck with Marc Maron on his website, WTFpod.com, or on iTunes or on Stitcher. And Stitcher, of course, which I'm trying to help promote this week, is a free News and Talk mobile application. The latest episodes of WTF, as well as Mr. Media, are always available for you there. No syncing needed, no memory wasted. It's available for your iPhone, your Palm Pre, Android phones, or your BlackBerry. Downloading is easy. Go to Stitcher.com or check out the App Store for your individual mobile phone. And you can see comedian Marc Maron in comedy clubs across the United States in the week ahead. I happen to have the schedule in front of me. This weekend, November 4th to 7th, 5th now, he's at Go Bananas in Cincinnati. The 11th and 13th will be at the 11th to the 13th will be at the Punchline, San Francisco. The 15th at the Crowfoot Ballroom in Pontiac, Michigan. The 19th, he's doing a live WTF at the UCB Theater in L.A. And December 9th and 10th, this looks like fun, be taping a new CD, I guess, at Union Hall in Brooklyn.
Yeah, that should be good.
To find out when he'll be in your town, and hopefully the Tampa Bay area will pop up on there at some point, go to his official website, Marc Maron, MarcMaron.com, and check out the show calendar. You can find his older comedy CDs right now at a great price at MrMedia.com. Mark, I hope the 30 minutes went by as fast for you as it did for me. Thank you so much for being on Mr. Media.
I really appreciate you having me. It's great. And now I feel a little like I was not as good as Bob Schimmel, and that you're cutting me off. I had a lot more to say, Bob. And, so I would like to do the show again, whether you want to or not.
Oh, God, now I feel like a total shit for cutting you off. Yes, come back. Come back tomorrow if you want.
Well, tomorrow's a little soon, Bob, but I think that...
Yeah, okay. Let's put it in context, shall we? Yeah, all right.
Yeah. No. Thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Thanks, Mark. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And, folks, for more original interviews with your favorite comedians, including Robert Schimmel, Lisa Lampanelli, John Caparulo, a whole bunch of them. Boy, there's just a lot. Surf over to our main website, MrMedia.com, MRmedia.com. Subscribe to Mr. Media on iTunes, and you'll never miss a show. Just search Mr. Media Interviews from within iTunes and subscribe for free. You can also listen with a piece of string and a tin can in many locations. If you've got an idea for a guest, want to comment on today's show, or would like to advertise, email me directly at bob@mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. You can also follow me on Facebook or on Twitter, twitter.com/Andelman, or on Facebook. Just search Mr. Media Interviews. It's a great way to keep up on the latest guests and the upcoming guests. Thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you sharing a piece of your day with Mr. Media. Thanks for listening.
I'm not going out tonight. I'm gonna sit at home in the dark, watching lights on the street tonight. Turn out the stereo receiver, turn your back on the deceiver. It's a bad idea to believe her, a bad idea to believe her. Turn up the stereo receiver, turn up the stereo receiver.
Hi, this is Buzz Burbank in the Buzz Burbank Newsroom, preparing for you another Buzz Burbank News and Comment. Do you like good stories? Boy, I sure do. I turn over a lot of stones each day to make sure I don't miss the best ones. Sure, some make me angry, and some make me sad, and some make me laugh, and isn't that what makes us human? I'm proud of the fact that I pack more news into my 10 or 15 minutes a day than the evening news does in a half hour. It's a free podcast at buzzburbank.com, or you can subscribe free at iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or get it on any RSS device. It's like a newspaper for your head. It's Buzz Burbank News and Comment, another Realm Network presentation. Weekday mornings right here on the Realm Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, welcome to the George and Tony Entertainment Show. Prepare for awesome mediocrity.
We're the Cousin Oliver of the Realm Network. I'm George.
And I'm Tony.
And we're a weekly family-friendly podcast about pop culture.
From our point of view.
At realmnetwork.com, the George and Tony Entertainment Show from the Realm Network.
This is Snake. Do you read me, Otacon?
Loud and clear, Snake.
Did you listen to the latest episode of the Gaming Marathon on the Realm Network?
Of course. They really know their stuff about gaming, especially that Usad guy.
Yeah, but that Chirac guy is a real jerk. I don't like him.
Regardless, the reviews are spot on and they tell it like it is.
That's for sure.
What happened, Snake? Were you spotted?
Nah, it's just Lowell Meltzer crying about the O's again.
Close call.
I better continue the search for Metal Gear, but keep listening to the Gaming Marathon each week.
You got it, Snake.
New every Monday afternoon right here on the Realm Network.
It's the Mark and Lowell Show.
Hi, this is Mark. And this is Lowell. And if you're fans of Don and Mike, you may know who we are.
Our number one interns. You've met them on the show. They're the guys that ate all the junk, and they were outside with each other holding hands with a sign that said they loved each other wearing the dunce caps.
And what you may not know is that we started out as fans back in their WAVA days.
Hi, Don and Mike. It's Mark and Lowell.
Oh, yeah. Hey, these are two guys that we once actually called them our protégés, didn't we?
And now we have our own show, so we want you to give it a shot. Just check us out at the Realm Network, realmnetwork.com, or you can go to markandlowell.com.
Resistance is futile. It's the Mark and Lowell Show. Every Tuesday and Thursday evenings right here on the Realm Network. And catch the Poor Premium Show Friday nights.